Too early for that. Unless you've been living under a rock, I'm sure you've seen the headlines.
Well, a $418 million settlement by the National Association of Realtors is expected to usher in sweeping reforms to the real estate market.
This is hitting the reset button on the housing market.
Absolutely, Charles, because this is huge news. It's arguably the biggest financial development to hit our nation in a long time.
What could be a revolutionary change in the always volatile housing market.
Some of them are actually pretty funny. Gotta love the media. They love the drama. Yeah, I'm not having any of that. Okay, so if you don't know what's been going on for the past 5 years, I'm gonna try to give you the cliff notes, however painful that they are. A bunch of lawyers spent a bunch of time rallying up the public to sue a bunch of real estate firms and the National Association of Realtors under class action status. You see, the Department of Justice was also investigating the National Association of Realtors. All of this was happening at the same time. Okay, you've probably been approached by a law firm at some point in time in your lifetime. You know, you get that card in the mail. Well, apparently a lot of people mailed those cards back. Well, how did all this come about? Well, about 6 years ago, the Department of Justice decided to start investigating the National Association of Realtors for their commission practices. They actually settled with the National Association of Realtors during the Trump administrations. They wanted us to make our commissions more transparent. So there was a settlement. And the National Association of Realtors followed all the rules set forth by the Department of Justice. However, these attorneys who got class action lawsuit status opened up another can of worms. The Department of Justice reopened their case, and here we are. The first two class action lawsuits, which were out of Missouri and Minnesota, won. And then you know what happened. There were copycat cases. And while I don't know what will happen with the copycat cases, I do know this. National Association of Realtors has now settled with the Department of Justice last week. So here are the details. Compensation offers are moved off of MLS. That's right. Sellers can still offer compensation. They just can't list exactly what they're paying in the multiple listing system anymore. Sellers can, however, offer concessions to a buyer. You know, closing costs, prepaids. These can be listed in MLS. This should go into effect in mid-July of this year. Buyers now have to sign buyer's contracts. So buyers will be required to sign a written agreement with the commission terms on it, and it will also outline exactly what services will be provided. The National Association of Realtors is also paying a $418 million payment over 4 years. Now, you may have seen dozens of videos on YouTube in reference to this event. Mine's going to be a little bit different. Just to bring you up to speed, the lawsuit itself said that the National Association of Realtors has engaged in anti-competitive practices. The lawsuit claims that the sharing of commissions between the listing agent and the buyer's agent violates the Sherman Antitrust Act. So basically, sellers can't put an offer of commission in the multiple listing system anymore. They can advertise it anywhere else they want, but it can't be in the multiple listing system anymore. And buyers, well, they now have to sign a buyer's agreement, and in most cases, pay the real estate commission. Now, some of you watching this probably think this is the best thing since sliced bread. And you know what? You're entitled to that opinion. But I'm going to give you my opinion. After reading numerous comments online, it's painfully apparent that the American public really doesn't understand how listing agreements work. Sellers have always had the option to negotiate their commission. On the listing agreement, there's a section for what are you going to pay the listing agent, what are you going to pay the buyer's agent. It's always been that way. The multiple listing system only required that you offer something to a buyer's agent in order to advertise your home in their system. Now, of course, if you don't want to pay the buyer's agent, I'm not sure why a buyer's agent would come to your house and show it. All realtors work on commission. There is no salary. They don't get paid unless they sell a property. Obviously, making an offer of compensation increases your chances of selling your home. So now, the seller, even if he wants to pay a buyer's agent, can't put it in the multiple listing system. Now, of course, this is supposed to start in July of this year if the judge accepts those terms. Now, here's where many people are missing the most unfortunate part about this settlement. The buyer now has to sign a buyer's agent agreement with whatever realtor he wants to use. It's not optional. Everybody has to sign it. So, for a realtor, this is great because those telephone calls that you get, somebody wants to pop into a house and take a look at it on the fly, that's now gone. You're gonna have to interview realtors, sign their contract, and if they're a good realtor, you're gonna have to provide your proof of funds up front and your loan approval. That's what I'd be asking for. With this new agreement, there's not a realtor in the world that's gonna set foot in a property unless they have a signed agreement with the buyer. So now buyers are gonna have to sign a buyer's agreement and agree to pay the real estate commission if the seller is not willing to pay. And with this settlement, in my opinion, a lot more sellers are not going to pay because they know the buyer has to sign that agreement. On top of his down payment, his closing costs, he now has an extra burden. So if it wasn't tough enough to buy a home already due to the extreme high prices that we have, we've just made it a little bit harder. This class action lawsuit also claimed that home prices were kept artificially high due to the fact that sellers had to pay the buyer's agent's fees. Well, I don't think that's true, and it's not going to change the home prices. If you actually think that a seller is now going to lower their house price because they don't have to pay a buyer's agent, they're just going to pocket that money. There's no way in hell they're going to lower their home price. So the buyer's going to still pay a high price, pay real estate commissions, pay a down payment, and pay closing costs. Even negotiating the commission down still means he's still paying commission. He's still paying more. Whether it's 3% commission or 1% commission, he's still paying commission that he wasn't paying before. And they didn't think through some lending rules, like for instance, a VA loan. VA loans don't allow buyers to pay realtor fees, so that will have to change. Otherwise, it'll be twice as hard for someone using a VA loan to get a home. And don't forget, while the seller may be smiling right now, he may have to go and buy another home. So there's that. So in my opinion, this has made things much worse for buyers. That's my opinion for what it's worth. Now, I did say that I would have a different twist on this whole thing, and if you've watched some of my other videos, you may know how I feel about these people. Well, their motto is, you will own nothing.
Here's a little song I wrote. You might want to hear it in your pod. You'll own nothing. and be happy.
You know what they say, you will own nothing and be happy. And then when you see our entire United States population being replaced, yes, I said replaced. There were more illegal aliens that came into this country than people being born. And then you see places like California offering interest-free loans to illegal migrants. And I have to wonder if this isn't all by design. There are just too many things lining up, making homeownership extremely unaffordable, especially for younger people.
But what about buyer's agents? I mean, the argument is to be made that for first-time buyers, for perhaps people lower income who might not know about what kind of deals, how they're made, how negotiations are done, how escalation clauses are done, isn't a buyer's agent helpful for a lot of people?
Right now, it is more affordable to rent than it is to pay for a mortgage. We are forecasting a slight correction in prices this year, down 1%, but it's just not enough to really make it or break it for a home buyer. It's probably going to keep getting less affordable, unfortunately.
Now, you can agree with the NAR settlement or not. That's your opinion. My opinion is that it puts buyers at a financial disadvantage. Now, of course, a buyer, you could do it alone without a realtor, but that's quite dicey. Real estate transactions are complicated. You have to know how to fill out legal forms, contracts, federal addendums, navigate inspections, inspection contingencies, just to name a few things. A lot of things can go wrong in a real estate transaction, and having a professional help you is important, especially if you're a first-time home buyer. You could pay an attorney. Attorney's not going to be cheap. If your deal doesn't go through, you make several offers, you got to pay them for each offer. The attorney's not going to sit through your inspection and handle inspection contingencies for you, at least not for free. I guess a buyer could say, I only want to buy a home where the seller's willing to pay my commission. Well, that's probably going to take more than half of the properties on the market out of reach for a buyer. The buyer's agent's going to have to pick up the phone, if he can get a listing agent on the phone, and asks them, are you willing to pay a buyer's agent commission? If he says no, that house is out the door if the buyer doesn't have the means in which to pay the real estate fees. Of course, I'd love to know what you think, and you can make your comments below. Just be respectful. If you agree with this settlement, you agree with it. If you don't, you don't. I personally don't think it helps buyers. It may help sellers, but I don't think it's helping buyers. It'll be interesting to see how much longer homes stay on the market because they're not offering compensation. There are a lot of realtors that are unhappy about this. I'm not one of them. You know, I look at it as a glass half full type situation. I'm 60. I was gonna wind it down in a few years anyways, so I'm not gonna change my business practices. Everybody will sign a contract if they want to work with me. I've done this for 30 years, so change is change. I'm more upset with the fact that we're doing a disservice to the buyers. It does bother me where this nation is headed, and the fact that the American dream and home ownership seems to get harder and harder every day. And I've got 3 grandchildren, and I worry about them all the time. All the things that are happening in this world. And I do worry that they may not be able to afford a home when they grow up. I hope that's not the case. Maybe you have grandkids too. Anyways, I am going to go try to find my little buddy, Truman. I'm sure he's missing his mama. Go give him a little scratch on the rear end and think about my next video. And I hope I see you next time around. Take care.